and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This time I'm talking to Talor Stone about her photography journey and an exciting new project she started. Talor is a PhD researcher and photographer based in Pensacola, Florida. After serving as a federal agent for the US military, Talor broke from the traditional career path to pursue photography. As an Arctic specialist, Talor has spent a significant amount of time exploring the northern region. Her summers in Greenland have inspired numerous academic research projects on topics like globalization and indigenous identity, mass tourism and peripheral communities, and climate-induced human migration among Inuit populations. These themes are echoed in her photographic pursuits, which focus heavily on Arctic landscapes and other climate change-inspired projects to allow her to visually explore the real-life aspects of her academic subjects. To further this mission, in 2022-23, Talor is partnering with filmmaker Ashley Payne to produce a documentary about the modern changes of hunting culture in northern Greenland based on more than 4 years of academic research. Talor's work is about more than photography. Her images merge science and art to highlight themes of transition and fragility and to emotionally connect viewers to places few will ever visit. Her hope is to raise awareness that climate-threatened landscapes are more than data points, charts and statistics. They're living places that deserve to be protected in their own right. In her role as an educator, Talor considers it a priority to enhance awareness and appreciation of the natural world through speaking engagements and hands-on education. Her photography workshops focus on introducing others to these magical remote places and creating a deeper understanding of the environment, while also learning new technical skills. Talor is proud to be a pro with Munch workshops who offer incredible and immersive photography experiences worldwide. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Talor. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Hey, Grant. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm good. I'm enjoying my evening, and I guess you're probably enjoying your coffee over there.
Yeah, it's about midday here at the moment, so it's almost time for lunch. I'll get into that after this, but yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board. You've been on the radar for a little while, and a couple of guests have mentioned you and suggested that I talk to you. So I thought, a good a time as any to get you going. How about we start with what got you started in photography, and a little bit about your background.
Sure, yeah. So diving into photography was probably something I didn't intend to do when I got started, at least not professionally. I actually think that I owe a lot of credit to a local camera club. It's something that I feel like a lot of professional photographers have a love-hate relationship with local camera clubs. It's the constant request for speaking engagement or that kind of thing. They have low budgets, but for me, like, that was how I got started, and I kind of owe everything to two little camera clubs in Virginia.
Sure.
When I started attending meetings before I even owned a camera. And
wow, okay.
Yeah, I didn't even own one. I just knew I loved photography and that I wanted to learn, but I didn't know how to learn, and I didn't know what camera I needed. So I just started showing up every week and going to photo walks, and a couple of the people in the clubs loaned me their cameras and let me learn with theirs, and that's how I got started.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of, maybe I don't think the local clubs get enough credit, and they really are the amazing proving ground for people to get started and collaborate with people and learn from different levels of experience to really build up and be able to have a solid foundation to move forward.
Yeah, sure. So in joining the club, what was it, I guess, or to prompt that prior to joining the club? What was it that you felt about photography that made you want to join the club in the first place?
Right. Yeah, okay. So we'll have to go back a little ways. When I was raised a little unconventionally. I grew up in South Louisiana. We
Uh-huh.
had like a house in the bayou, like
Wow.
overlooking a swamp. I mean, it's just nature everywhere. And I was very lucky to have a stay-at-home mom who was so dedicated to educating me and my brother. Like, we went to school, we went home, and being at home was like being at school. It was just
Yeah.
education nonstop. And part of that was that we weren't really allowed to watch cartoons. If we wanted to watch TV, it was Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, and National Geographic.
No education.
So yeah, yeah. So when I was like 5, and every other kid in school wants to be an astronaut or a fireman, I was telling people I wanted to be a National Geographic photographer, which then people look at you funny because you're 5 and like, who knows what that is. But I mean, it was my role model. That's what I was watching on TV, and it's what got me really excited. But I never had a camera. I know, it's crazy. It's like I had this childhood dream, and I think like most people, you let go of that dream as you mature
Yeah.
because when you're a kid and you want to be an astronaut, it's not too long till you let go of that and you pick something a little bit more like conventional.
Yeah. Well, it's not that
Reality
easy to
set
be an
goals.
astronaut either.
Yeah, your academic advisors tell you, oh, that's probably not a good
Not going to
idea.
happen.
The giant wet blanket of the universe tells you that your dreams aren't real. You should
Oh,
pick
yeah.
something more reasonable.
There's a lot of photographers that get that as well. It's not a real job. It's you can't make a
Yeah,
living out of it. It's really hard, etc., etc.
right. Yeah, I mean, I ended up, following a pretty conventional path, but I was in the military. And when I got out of the military, I kind of decided that it was time for me to explore this other thing. Like the passion never died for visual art. That was always there.
Yeah.
But I had never tried to explore it in any way. So when I moved to Virginia, I joined the camera club. I bought my first camera. It wasn't about being a National Geographic photographer anymore, because it turns out that wasn't really my role model. My role model was just visual art.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to create. And so I just started working to pursue that. I never thought I would do it professionally, not at first.
Mm.
Um, I kind of went about it. I It wasn't reckless the way I got started, because it wasn't intended to happen the way that it happened. But at first, I was spending a lot of time traveling out west, and I had people in the camera clubs that were saying, well, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go.
Yep.
So I ended up organizing some trips I mean, it was for myself, but also for the camera club. It was basically, I just like organized the logistics of it, and people joined up. It was not profit.
Yeah.
Trust me. It was not, I wasn't making money. I didn't think I had anything to offer, right?
Yeah.
I was still pretty new with photography, and I thought that what I had to offer was getting people to a place they've never been, but I wasn't trying to run a workshop because I didn't think that I had anything to
Yeah.
offer in terms of education. Like, what would they possibly want to know from me? These people they've been shooting for 20 years in this camera club. Like, I didn't think that I could help them.
Yeah.
Just classic imposter syndrome. And I organized a trip, and we went out, and everyone had so much fun that I ended up having more people just continually ask to do stuff like that. And it kind of was like, okay, well, if that's the case, I have to be legit, right? You have to do all the business things, you have to get insurance, you have to get permits, like you have to figure out how to make it all happen. And through that process, I kind of developed the confidence that it would take to turn it into a full-time job. It's confidence building. I didn't really have a mentor. I kind of just went for it and figured it out. And at the start, they weren't intended as workshops because I wasn't ready to teach. But it eventually evolved as I became more confident in working with other people and feeling like I actually did have something of value to bring to the table.
Oh, that's great. So, when you're running a workshop, what's the most important thing that is in creating that atmosphere that's going to help people be creative in the field?
I think for me, what I've learned over time is that every group is different. The people join for different reasons. People have different skill levels, so you always have a very diverse group. And success really starts with being able to understand how to manage group dynamics, because it doesn't matter how well you know photography if you don't know how to manage a group of people who have very diverse interests.
Yep.
You are set up for failure from the beginning.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think what I usually do is I really focus on creating a teamwork environment, and that starts right when people sign up with me. They get a phone call, there's lots of emails, I put people in group chats, and I build up a teamwork community. I continually say the phrase teamwork over and over and over again. So that they know that this is like what we're doing.
This isn't all about you. Yeah.
It's not, and you have to be a team. And when people work together as a team, they're able to be more creative because they're helping each other and they're building each other up. And I can instruct and teach, but it's a much better experience overall if people work together to find cool things that interest them, or collaborate on techniques or ideas. I love seeing that, and I try and create an environment where people feel like they are actually part of a team.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you find yourself, I guess, drawing on some of your military background in that, not ordering people around or anything like that, but I guess that organisation and that teamwork. Very,
well. It's funny because I don't know how much of that I can really attribute to the military, because I'm just that way. I always have been. I'm hyper organized, very structured person. I'm very organized. I always have been. And so being organized is so essential, because it's not even while you're physically at a location, it's managing the paperwork, managing the invoicing, all the business logistics that create this whole life that you're trying to build. It's held together by very logical, dry, mundane steps, and if you skip them, you're really screwed.
Yeah, definitely.
So being organized pays off.
How do you trade that off against the creativity and the creative side of the business, I guess?
Oh my gosh, I have to remind myself to have fun sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, because I can be very especially when I'm working at home, more so than when I'm in the field. When I'm at home, oh my gosh, I live somewhere beautiful. I live right by the beach, and I could walk to the beach if I wanted to, and I'll go a week, 2 weeks without going to the beach because I'm working 14-hour days in front of a computer. And it's very hard for me to remember that I need to stop and go see sunset or something like that to get that creative, get back in touch with that part of my brain, because otherwise you get burned out. And I'm not the person to give advice on that, because I'm constantly failing. I fail at that almost every day. I was very proud of myself because yesterday I caught sunset for the first time in 3 weeks. And that was really good. And that's kind of pitiful to say. I mean, I'm a photographer, I live somewhere beautiful, and I'm not going to catch sunset, but it's because I'm so driven and hyper focused that when I'm in work mode, that's it. Nothing else exists around me. And sometimes work mode means my computer. Sometimes it doesn't mean my camera.
Yep. Okay. So when you're shooting, I guess, or when you're organising your trips, etc., are you thinking about all the travel logistics as well as because I'd imagine that you've got people from all over the place wanting to join some of your workshops. How do you arrange that? Do you let people organise their own travel to the set location, you meet up, and then you?
It depends. Okay, so it depends. If I'm organizing something international, so I have to make a point here, which is that I am transitioning right now from running my own workshops to
Yep.
now being a pro on the Munch workshops team.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I talk about organizing it for myself, I'm talking about when I was running my own independent workshops and I
Right.
was doing logistics for that. So this will be the last year that I have my own workshops. Going forward, it will all be under the Munch Workshops umbrella.
Okay.
But when I was doing my own, I recommend certain flights for international things. During COVID, you have to handle all the COVID protocols, make sure
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
get their paperwork done on time. I mean, it's a beast. For workshops, there's different philosophies of whether or not the person leading the workshop handles the hotels or vehicles. And I've always taken the approach that I handle it because it makes it logistically easier for me, but it's also less for the client to worry about.
Yeah.
In part, people sign up for workshops because they want to hand the reins off to someone else so they can truly enjoy their experience. So I take over that part so that they can just show up and have a good time. That's all I want them to do is have a good time, and take great pictures. But now that I'm working with Munch workshops, I mean, I can't say enough good things about how amazing that is. So shout
You
out
can
to them
offload a lot of
because
that side of things. Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I didn't know that they knew I was breathing on Earth when they approached me. So I was shocked that they were interested in bringing me onto their team and very flattered. It's very humbling. But they handle everything. They have an amazing admin person. Like shout out to Lori, she's great. And now all the logistics are handled by the admin team, which is amazing because what does that mean for me? I get to just show up and teach. Like I board my flight, I show up, I teach my clients, we have an amazing time, I go home, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I didn't know it could be this good.
So how far do you travel each year?
How far?
Yeah.
Um, well, in 2021, I put 30,000 miles on my car.
Wow.
So that's a lot. Driving coast to coast quite a bit. I this 2022, this year, I will be away from home all but 8 weeks.
Wow.
I'm only spending 8 weeks at home, and I just did 3 of them. So I'm about to be gone. I leave February 21st, and I won't go back home for more than 2 days until the end of September.
Wow. That's a lot.
It's this is going to be my hardest year yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had tough schedules like this in the past, but this year is because I have my own independent workshops that are wrapping up and also a full load with Munch workshops and another huge project coming up. So it's just the meeting of all the storms. And so if I'm still standing at the end of the year, give me a pat on the back.
I can imagine what it's going to be like at the end of the year. You're going to breathe a sigh of relief, I think.
I hope I still have some hair, and I also hope that I still have friends and family that want to talk to me.
Yeah, well, that's it. I guess that's another aspect is how do you balance that sort of friends and family with that kind of workload?
It's so hard. I think everyone probably has their own answer to that, so I can't speak universally, but
Sure.
the struggle is real. I mean, I have grandparents who are not in great health, and I want to spend as much time as possible with them. It's hard to make those choices and to balance between the career and chasing my dream and like being home with my family who needs me. Talk about relationships. That's hard. I have a boyfriend who is wonderful. I'm grateful because we've been friends for about 6 years before we started dating. So he kind of knew what the deal was before he signed up for it willingly. So, and he travels with me quite a bit. So he's
That's
able
nice.
to join me on the road for long periods of time, and that makes it easier, but it's not easy by any means.
Yeah.
So it's balancing. And I think for anyone who's looking to work full time in this space and keep a really high speed schedule where you're on the road a lot teaching, you're going to have to be willing to make some sacrifices. And I think you're going to find that some relationships just don't stand up to the test of it.
Yeah, definitely. I guess you mentioned your the project that you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and in particular about the organisation of it and how it's actually going to be funded and managed, etc.?
Right. Yeah. So I'm working with a filmmaker. Her name's Ashley Payne. So if anyone looks for her online, her production company is called Tracing Thought. So that's how you find her. She is amazing and very talented. So I'm excited to work with her. We are filming a documentary in Greenland. So it's actually pretty wild. We got invited to live with a family in the northernmost continually inhabited place on Earth, which is crazy.
Wow.
And we're going to be living with them for 2 months and documenting their life and the way that globalization, which includes climate change, has impacted their traditional practices.
Mm-hmm.
So to fund a project of this scale has been a monumental challenge, especially during a pandemic.
Yep.
We've had an extremely hard time getting financial backers on board, especially for an international project. Lots of claims of budget constraints and that type of thing. So it's been...
Yeah, there's a lot of organisations that would normally fund these sorts of things that are just holding.
Yeah, it has been very hard. I mean, the number of pitches we've made, it has been like shouting into the void. So anyone else who's a professional creative probably knows that feeling of just pitch after pitch and just blank stares in the room. It's really difficult. So what we ended up doing, we have some money that's come from a variety of sources, but it's not enough to pay for our translator and to compensate the family who is hosting us, because let's face it, I don't know how to go catch a seal, so they're going to be feeding us. So we have to compensate them. I might know how to catch a seal by the end of it, who knows? But so we're doing a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter runs from February 15th until March 16th. And the Kickstarter campaign is this whole different animal. I didn't really know what it was about until we started trying to create this project. And I feel like not a lot of people actually know how Kickstarter works. So I can break it down for you.
Yeah, sure. We've got
Kickstarter is all or nothing. So that means that if we don't actually hit our goal, we get $0 and all of the money is refunded back to the people who donated. So, I mean, there's a good reason that Kickstarter does that. And the reason is because if this is the amount of money we need to be successful, they don't want to halfway fund a failed project.
Yeah.
So that's great for the people who are donating, because it means that if you donate and we successfully fund our project, like we have the budget that we need. So it increases our chances of success exponentially. So that's great, but it's also very scary if you're creating it.
Yeah.
I can't even explain to you the amount of time that has gone into trying to decide what the right number is. Because you don't want to set it too high, because you might not make it. But if you set it too
high, not only that, whatever number you come up with, it won't be the right number.
It's so hard to know, because if you set it too low, then maybe you're underselling the amount of support that you have. Maybe,
yeah, but it also means that you may not be able to do exactly what it is that you want to be able to do.
Exactly. So it has been really difficult for us to settle on the right number. Many budget spreadsheets have gone into trying to figure this out. And then just there's an algorithm that runs Kickstarter, which I know all of us are very familiar with the trials and tribulations of algorithms. So basically what that means is that Kickstarter looks at the amount of clicks and donations on a campaign to determine whether or not to prioritize your campaign in search results.
Right.
So that's how they decide whether or not anyone sees it. So then you have to create this huge campaign and get this whole coalition of people on board. So you're not just creating a Kickstarter campaign. You're creating a bulletproof budget, you hope.
Yep.
You're coordinating dozens to hundreds of people and basically calling in every favor you know to get people to help promote it and spread the reach, because that's the only way people find you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're just kind of like hoping that when the rubber meets the road, there's a lot of people who consume your social media for free. As a photographer, we're constantly putting out pictures, videos, tutorials, blogs. We put out a lot of free education, and people love to consume free education. And that's great. That's what we're doing it for, right? I want to share with the world. It's not all about money. I just want to share. But sometimes you need money to get things done. And it's hard sometimes to know, like, when the rubber meets the road, like who's going to show up. So it's an endeavor, I'll tell you. I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, we'll be in the home stretch. So hopefully, if you check the Kickstarter from the podcast link, then you'll see that we're on track. And, you know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can get you, help get you over the line. So
yes, get me to that finish line. That's all we need. And, you know, I just want to reiterate that, like, we made a decision early on with this project that we are donating all of our time to it. So Ashley and I, our time is unpaid. That includes the editing, the filmmaking. Like we are going to end up much poorer for making this project, but it's just something that we're so passionate about. So at the end of the day, we're just worried about making sure that the people who are supporting us on the ground are compensated with a fair wage, because, like, why would I show up to a community like this and not be willing to, like, put my own money where my mouth is and pay a fair wage to the people who are helping us? So
definitely. No, that's fantastic. Sounds like a really exciting project, and I mean, you know, it raises a couple of issues, I guess, around you know, as you mentioned, climate change, but also you know, some of the globalization and social and cultural changes that are going on in, you know, some of these remote places in the world. And you know, I mean, I'm certainly very keen to see the result of this and see what happens. And so when do you think the documentary would be coming out? It'd obviously take a few months after filming and everything to do all the post-production, etc. So
correct. Yeah, so it's going to take a significant amount of time. We are filming in July and August.
Yep.
And then we tentatively will go back to film in February and March, because we want to do some winter scenes as well. However, we are not locking that in until we have already been there and formed strong relationships with the people that we're working with. Because to film in winter is challenging, and it requires you to have a very strong relationship with the people that you're going with, because we're going to go out hunting on the ice, and it's very dangerous and very difficult conditions to work in. So that is tentatively on the schedule for winter.
Yeah. Well, the Greenland in winter is a real winter.
Yes. No sunlight. Well, in late February, the sun comes back up for a few minutes each day. So we'll see that. Yeah, so I'll be cold. I'll be freezing. I'm from South Louisiana, but, you know, I'm just going with it. But yeah, so we're hoping we're hoping to submit to festivals at the end of 2023. which
Yep.
gives us plenty of time to do all the post-processing and cutting the film together. Ashley's going to be doing 99% of that work.
Yep.
She's the professional filmmaker, so she's going to be doing the final cut on the video. So kudos to her, because I know it's going to take so much time. And it'll be submitted to film festivals for the premiere.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, it's definitely going to be a worthwhile thing to commit so much time and effort to. And, as I say, I'm really looking forward to seeing the end result. It sounds like an amazing experience, let alone, the project in behind it and the meaning.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely talk a little bit more about the project.
Sure.
I could talk forever about it. It's basically my entire life right now.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so the idea actually was born from my PhD research.
Mm-hmm.
So as a researcher, I've been studying the impacts of globalization on Greenland's rural communities for about 4 years.
Yep.
And so this is something I'm just incredibly passionate about. I've spent 2 summers in Greenland kind of getting to know the country and personally experiencing just what it's like to be there. And I guess you could say just getting a feel for the place, kind of falling in love with it. And so the idea came out of my research, and I reached out to Ashley to create this project. She fell in love with the idea. She specializes in telling indigenous stories.
Yep.
So she was the perfect person to work with for a project like this. And so we have created this entire, it's like a little ecosystem around this film, because now it's so much more than a film. I'm very focused on impact. So is Ashley. So it was never going to be enough for us to just create a really beautiful film. Like,
yep.
That was not really our goal. Like the film, yes, that's the shiny object. I understand that that's what the way most people will engage with this project is through the film, probably. But we also have a couple other things going on. We have reached out to the National Museum in Greenland, and yep. We are navigating a collaboration with them so that we can share all of our interview footage and our translations with them, because the community that we're going in speaks a critically endangered language that is rarely documented. Yep. And so we will have all this incredible footage of this endangered language, and it will be translated for other people to enjoy. Most people in Greenland have never heard this language.
Yeah.
So that's how unique it is. And because it's endangered, there's a real risk in my lifetime that this language, and with it, all of its cultural stories and cultural memories, will disappear. So we really wanted to make sure that whatever footage we created, that it's not going to just end up dusty on a hard drive, because that seemed like a really inappropriate end for such an amazing product. Definitely. And so we reached out to Greenland, the National Museum there, and the archive, and we're going to be sharing some of the footage with them so that they can preserve it forever and make it accessible for free to the public, both in Greenland and worldwide, so that people can engage with these stories and hear a language, and also hear the cultural memories of a way of life that really is at risk of disappearing.
Mm. No, I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. And I think that museum piece that you're creating as well is going to be a really valuable resource, I guess, for the future. It's kudos to you and Ash. It's just going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just the nerd in me, but something about it gets me really excited about being able to go online and listen to, a drum song from a community that I might, most people will never meet. Most people will never have that experience, but you can hear the music, and, you can participate in that story.
Definitely. Aside from the project that you're running currently, that's obviously going to be taking up a lot of your creative thinking right now. What else is it about landscapes in particular, I guess, that motivates you creatively? What what gets you out of bed, on a normal day, if there is such
Right.
a thing?
It's hard to find a normal day, but yeah, I think I think I'm like many other photographers in that what gets you excited about photography evolves over time.
Yep.
And we all kind of take different directions with that, but I think many of us have that experience where we really grow and develop and mature with our creative vision over time. So, a lot of people start off with emulation, right? You photograph what you see on
Yep.
Instagram, right? These grand landscapes with blazing sunrises, and you know the ones. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. These really just very vibrant, eye-catching. They do well on social media and they get a lot of likes. And that's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that type of photography. I still shoot it sometimes because how could you not? But I have slowly over the last 2 years or so really pivoted my style of photography towards I'm more interested in the conservation story that's in the
Yep.
landscape. So if you were to go to my website, you'll see that my galleries are based around environmental themes. So I talk about Arctic coastal fog, and I'll have a whole project about what Arctic coastal fog looks like and what it means in terms of climate change. I talk about sand dunes, desertification. There's a whole host of things that I discuss that's embedded in my gallery. So when you look at pictures, it's more than a picture, it's a story, and you can engage with the story and kind of walk away with a better understanding of what a place is really about.
Yep.
So kind of creating that, I guess there's a phrase that I use a lot, which is I look at the pieces that make the whole. So when I look at a landscape and I'm really interested in it, sure, maybe I'll use a wide lens and photograph a grand landscape. I mean, definitely I'll do that. But I often now will gravitate towards a zoom lens and break down the landscape into its individual pieces that interest me. So I try and break it down into what I think are like the key elements that make this particular place I'm photographing unique and special.
Yep.
And I try and photograph really an array of those elements so that I have a more cohesive story at the end of it to put together, so that when hopefully if you look at a collection of images, you have more of a sense of place or like a sense of what an environment is like rather than looking at pretty pictures.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So in that respect, I guess, are you trying to be artistic in creating that experience, or is it more towards the experiential end of the spectrum? You've got the journalistic, here's a shot, here's what was there, here's the light that was there, through to something that's more artistically, whether you're getting into more editing and composites and those sorts of things. Where in that spectrum, I guess, do you see yourself fitting?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. There's actually two ways to answer this question. The first is like the simple approach, which is I really shoot natural landscapes. So I don't do editing. I almost never use Photoshop if I can avoid it. I don't do a lot of color modification or structurally alter my images. If I do, like I say that that's what I'm doing. But generally I don't, so no need for a disclaimer because I just don't really do that. I admire many photos that do it though, so that's not a critique.
Oh yeah. I'm exactly the same. I don't think there's anything wrong with either end of that.
It's just not where my passion.
More about and the question is more about what is it about your work that you prefer? Do you whereabouts on the spectrum do you like to sit, I guess,
Yeah, I just try and keep it pretty simple. But I think the other part of answering that question is like, where do I feel like I am in terms of like the photojournalistic style? And I think that that's something I'm still struggling with. especially because I'm trying to tell stories with my images. And I've found that it's really challenging to do that with landscape photography versus wildlife photography, which is very easy to create an empathetic response about a conservation story. And same with people. Photographing people is much easier to create a storyline that people can relate to and connect with. With landscapes, I have not perfected this yet. I'm still working on it actively and actively thinking about how do I create stronger stories out of landscapes, because it is a bit more difficult to get people to connect with them. So
as aside from, it's a pretty landscape or a pretty view,
right. Or to how do you tell a story of water erosion in a set of still photos that are still beautiful? Because I like to shoot beautiful photos. I don't shoot journalistic style photos. I shoot traditional landscape, want to hang it on your wall pictures. And how do you tell a complex story when you're photographing a beautiful parts of a landscape? It's a difficult balance to strike. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm trying to figure it out.
No, that's great. That's great. I guess in doing that, do you find that you're looking for something that's a concept that's fully formed in your mind before you go into the field, or are you going into the field and developing that concept as you see the scenes in front of you?
It's so funny. I have a webinar coming up in March where I talk about this, about discovering hidden places.
All right, I haven't seen your notes, so.
Yeah. So I talk about how there's two methods of doing this. And the first one is intentionality, and the other one is what I call creative surprise. So with intentionality, you are going to a place with the purpose of looking for something that might be overlooked. And you can do this anywhere. I mean, you could go to Zabriskie Point in Death Valley, one of the most photographed places ever, and still be intentional about finding a unique story that hasn't been told yet in that landscape. So, you can take that intentionality and that mindset of like hunting for a specific story or just hunting for any story with you. But then the other side of it is the creative surprise. And I think that comes down to mindset. So you just have to be willing to be surprised. The best surprise I had was pretty recent. I had a girlfriend's weekend down at a local state park. I mean, it was totally mundane. We were just drinking and having a good time. And we, something just caught my eye, and that was it for the weekend. My poor friend had to deal with me wielding my camera for the rest of the weekend. Because I had an open mind about something that inspired me, and I saw something that caught my eye, and that was it. And I was willing to pursue that line of thought. You have to be curious, but it's not just enough to be curious. You have to be curious, and you have to be willing to follow it, and like ask questions and pursue it, not just wonder about something and walk away.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point. It's that pursuit that really gets you to the point where you're actually you're starting to use that intentionality, I guess, where you're saying, okay, well, that's something really worth taking a shot of, and that's I guess sometimes the hardest part. How do you deal with that time, those times when you're out there in the field and you just, everything you look at, you kind of go, nah, it just doesn't work.
Sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, I think there's different approaches to it. I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as bad light. You can get great pictures any time of day. You can get great pictures in any condition. They're always out there. You just have to shoot for what's available. But sometimes, just personally for you, if it's not doing it for you, man, like, kick back and enjoy the sunset. And I've gotten really good in the last couple of years of just enjoying sunsets. I almost never photograph them anymore if I'm by myself. I mean, if I'm with a workshop group, that's different. But
Sure.
if I am just out with myself shooting, more often than not, I just enjoy the sunset and I don't shoot. It would have to be something pretty exceptional, but that's intentional on my part. Like I want to just enjoy that moment and relax and just kind of take it in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of photographers kind of forget about sometimes, that, you know, they go out there, they've got the camera with them, and, you know, they're more intent on the shot than enjoying the moment. And
oh gosh. I've gotten better at that. I mean, I think that a lot of people struggle with that at the beginning.
I know I do. Yeah.
You photograph everything. Well, okay, there's two sides of it. The first side is that, God, I've learned that I just don't want to go through that many pictures. Like I don't.
Yeah, the editing process is always a big turn off, isn't it?
There's too many pictures. I can't do it. But then the other part is that you're not actually experiencing what you're doing. I mean, sometimes you can, right? Like you're having such a good time photographing that that's the way you want to experience the moment. And I have that too. That's amazing when you experience a moment through your camera. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. There have been many uphill climbs that I have carried my camera and lugged it all the way up there, and I never took it out of a bag because I was just having fun. And you know, you have to know when it's time to just have fun too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important lesson. Yeah. In terms of, you know, the too many shots, I've got a friend who he does motorsport photography, and he's recently just got himself one of the new Canon R3s, which is I think 30 frames a second. So I think he's just started to realise the problems of having something that shoots that many shots that fast.
You got to be light with that shutter. You got to watch it.
Yeah, just way too many shots to edit. When you are in the field and you know, you've got the camera out, you've found you found your composition, etc. What's going through your mind as you're, you know, setting up? And is it all about the settings, or is it all about the composition? Is it a combination of both, or do you have a fixed process that you go through?
Well, first off, if I get really excited about a picture, I'm like, I'm uncontrollable. my boyfriend loves to tell a story about this one time that we were backcountry in Death Valley. I mean, like really far from pavement, and we were driving down this 4-wheel drive road, and he was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and I looked over and I saw the full moon rising between some Joshua trees on a hill, but we weren't in the right position. I knew I had to be closer to get everything to line up. I got out of that car while it was still driving. I said, stop. And I literally like was out of that car. I ran across this field to go get this photo because I was
got a vision of you jumping over cactus plants, etc.
I mean, look, I was full on pole vaulting across this field to go. I was excited. It's what I wanted to do. When I have that vision and I have a moment that just clicks in my head, boy, I am gone. That is what I'm doing. Nothing else in the world exists. I'm so laser focused on it. In terms of whether I'm worried about composition or setting, I worry most about composition, but that's a luxury of shooting a lot. And if you shoot so much, you don't have to worry a lot about settings because it becomes very intuitive. I always shoot on manual and I kind of know exactly where my sweet spots are, and I really don't think about it. It kind of is second nature, which is nice. When you're shooting by yourself, you don't want to be thinking about things like that. You know, because you're just trying to get the shot that you're envisioning. You want it to just be automatic. You know what settings to put your camera on. It gets a little more complex when you're trying to do long exposures, but even that, if you shoot a lot of long exposures, it gets really intuitive.
Yeah,
it just
again, you know your sweet spots. If you're using filters, you know what filter and what settings behind it. Yeah.
You know, I teach a lot of waterfall workshops because I live pretty close to the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so I'm constantly teaching waterfall workshops. And I understand that people don't always have the opportunity to shoot long exposures often.
Yeah.
So I end up with a lot of people who maybe have never even done it before or don't really understand how ND filters work. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to know. That's what I'm there for. I'm there to help you. But
Yep.
I always tell people that if you just practice, it becomes so intuitive. Like, I can look at a particular waterfall and know exactly what shutter speed, what is the sweet spot for the effect I'm going for, but it's because I do it all the time. And so practice, 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 and just repetition. And then it's not just enough to do it. You have to be a critic of yourself. Look at your photos, look at your settings in Lightroom. And while I don't like the way this came out, check your settings. Maybe you can learn something from the mistakes that you're making to critique yourself and evolve into a better photographer.
Definitely. Do you think where you live has a strong influence on what you shoot, or is it because you travel around so much for workshops, etc., that you've been able to just very much vary your portfolio?
I can see that it would have a role for a lot of people. Actually, I think it creates a big advantage for people that live in particularly scenic places. For example, here in the US, if you live in Colorado or Utah, I mean, you've got a leg up.
Yeah.
Fantastic world-class photos are right, just a short drive away. I have never lived somewhere like that. I grew up in South Louisiana. I lived in a terribly flat place in Georgia that was just peanut farms. I lived on the coast in Virginia, which is plain beaches, no coastal images to have there. It's just sand and water. So there's really not a lot of photography happening. And then same thing in Pensacola, Florida. So I have not lived in places that fostered a lot of photographic creativity. I've had to force myself to learn and enjoy photographing these places that I've lived. So for me, it has been just going and getting it. I mean, you just have to go, be willing to adventure. When I first started out, I lived on the road for over a year. Literally, I lived in my car and I had a tent and I slept in the tent or my car for over a year. And that's what I did, because I knew if I wanted to take photography seriously, you have to build a portfolio. Well, to build a portfolio, you have to be there for the seasons. The flowers only bloom 1 week a year. Well, there's no replica for not being there. Like, you have to physically be there. If you are not physically there, you will not get the shot. It's just, you just have to put in the time. I mean, I sacrificed everything. I mean, I was broke. I mean, completely, I was so broke, literally dirt bagging, living in my car, showering at truck stops. I can't even tell you how many times I've washed my hair in rust stop sinks and personally alarmed entire families on vacation. Let me tell you, the automatic hand dryers are really good hair dryers. You just sit under them, and I've gotten nice blowout from that,
Yeah, well, I don't have that problem.
Yeah, you improvise. Let me tell you, you improvise but that's what I did, because I wanted to take it seriously. I knew that I had to build a portfolio, and I wanted to do it in a short period of time.
Sure.
Right? I didn't have a backup plan. I had no other plan. This was my plan, and I didn't give myself another option. And because of that, I had to succeed in a short period of time. And it was like being in a pressure cooker. And I mean, I don't know how I pulled a decent portfolio out of that experience, because when I look back, I'm like, wow, I didn't really know a lot about photography. I mean, I was crash course learning it, doing everything wrong, reading a photography for beginners guidebook. Literally, I'm not even joking. That's what I read. I got it on Amazon, and I was just going for it, trying to figure it out. But somehow it happened.
What do you think you learned about yourself and the world in that time?
I learned that people are good when you give them a chance. I know that you're probably thinking that I would learn something about photography, but
No,
instead,
no, no. I'm more interested in the personal growth and the.
yeah, I learn more about people, because when you don't have a lot and you're relying a lot on the kindness of strangers, which I did, I was often using couch surfing, which is, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but couch surfing is a web platform to match you with a host. It's like Airbnb, but it's free.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've used it for like 8 years now, and I like it. Vet your host. If you're thinking about doing it, make sure they have good references. That's all I'm saying. Make sure that you have references for your host. But, I relied on the kindness of strangers a lot, to make that year happen, and learning that to not be so afraid of other people. People are usually good and kind when you need help. And if you approach with humility and you ask for help, people will mostly stop what they're doing to help you most of the time. And that also is probably because I'm a young female, but I still think that it's true to some extent, regardless of your situation, if you approach people with humility. And there were times that I did need it, like, having a tire blowout and needing a ride into town, and then needing a ride back to my car and having to have someone else transport a tire for me. I fractured my foot in the Grand Canyon, and I had to drive myself with a fractured foot to a hospital. I didn't have anywhere to sleep that night, and the doctor who put my foot in a boot, invited me into his family's home. I lived with them for a couple of days. They fed me because they weren't going to let me sleep in my car with a booted foot. I mean, there were kind people at every turn along the road that have made me less afraid to do what I do, because now I have more faith in humanity.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Trust me, that faith is rocked almost on a daily basis. I just try not to do that.
I guess, do you have a favourite place where you like to shoot? Is it the waterfalls, or is it somewhere else that you sort of keep being drawn back to?
I think here in the US, that's so hard. My favorite national park would have to be Death Valley, because there's just it's so much more than just gravel, which is what most people see when they just cruise through it at 50 miles an hour. It's this dry, arid landscape. Who would want to hang out here? And I'm like, wow, it's amazing. If you leave the pavement and go put in the time, there are so many hidden layers to that landscape that there are places that I still have never seen. And I can assure you, I've put in the time to find as many as I could, but I'm still hunting. I would say non-national park in the US would have to be the Southern Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yep.
It's a hidden gem. Not enough people know about this amazing place that's like right, on the East Coast. And you don't have to go to Smoky Mountains National Park. You don't have to. I mean, there are places that are, in my opinion, better, that are not part of the national park, and you could go hike on trails that you will never see another person. It's just incredibly diverse, and there's waterfalls all around you at any moment of time. There's waterfalls everywhere. It's incredible. Internationally, it has to be Greenland. It has to be. My favorite subject to photograph is ice. Because ice can be so many colors. It reflects so much about itself and the landscape. It can be in these fantastic shapes and forms that are impossible to find anywhere else in nature. And it's always changing. I could take a photograph of one iceberg, come back in an hour, and it's different. These things change so quickly. It makes for very dynamic shooting. And for that reason, I love to photograph ice.
You mentioned these trails with nobody on them. I know that there's a lot of stories around, some of the more iconic places in Utah, Colorado, and Pacific Northwest, etc., where you're actually queuing to take a shot. How much do you think that social media is to blame for that popularity, or and
Oh.
people not geotagging, and now because places are getting so crowded, and in some cases disrespected.
You can't win. I mean, because if you geotag, then places get destroyed. If you don't geotag, you're gatekeeping. If you don't geotag, people are going to find it anyway because they're going to use Google Earth. So it really doesn't matter, and it's irrelevant. So the only way to protect the place is never post it. But then how do I do my job?
That's right.
I mean, it's a losing battle. I mean, I think the popularity of specific locations, many of them, is directly related to social media.
Yeah.
But I think people also need to be able to experience the beauty that our world has to offer. So the answer probably comes back to stronger conservation plans in popular locations. Nobody likes to limit access, but at a certain point, sometimes you have to. Like, for example, Angel's Landing in Utah. It's a very popular trail. If you're unfamiliar with it, it has that super narrow section at the top that you have to pull yourself up on chains, and there's no safety freaking precautions anywhere, which is mind blowing to me. I have done it 6 times. I don't know what's wrong with me. I keep going with friends and they want to do it, so I keep doing it. And it has been the last 2 times that I did it, I had such traumatic experiences that the last time I turned around and quit because there was no safety regulations whatsoever. It's extremely dangerous trail. The drop off is enormous. And the day that we went, there was ice, and there were people up there in Converses with no grip on the bottom. Like, you're basically in house slippers climbing up an icicle with a 2,000-foot drop. And it's like, I saw a guy slip in front of me bad enough that people started screaming, and I stopped. I was done. I turned around. I was out of there. I just wasn't going to watch someone die that day. But now they've instituted some type of ticketing procedure. I haven't gone since, and I don't think I'll ever go again, to be honest, because that experience was so difficult to even watch or be a part of. And that when you're seeing it, you identify it as a problem, and then you realize immediately that you're part of the problem. It's like when you're in traffic and you're getting mad at traffic, but you are the traffic.
You're in the traffic, so you're part of it. Yeah,
you are the traffic. So I don't want to be a part of that problem anymore.
Yeah, I get it. I guess you mentioned the safety aspect there. I mean, I shoot a lot of sunrise shots on rock shelves, flowing water and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I always talk to people about, and I've mentioned it on the podcast a few times, is if you're going to do something like that, make sure you have the right equipment. I've got a pair of cleated neoprene boots, so they're kind of like the surfer's booty, but with cleats at the bottom, so that they've got grip on the rocks.
Wow! I want you to send me the link for that. I want to.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they're everywhere here in Australia. There's a big, very popular pastime is rock fishing. And so you can go to pretty much any camping or fishing store and pick up a set of cleated booties to wear while you're out on a rock shelf. And but even with that, there are still people, particularly rock fishermen. I haven't heard too many photographers, but I've heard of quite a few rock fishermen getting swept off rocks. There was actually a recent one only a few weeks ago where a father and son were both swept off, and luckily the son was rescued, but unfortunately the father was not. So it can be really dangerous out there, and I guess that safety aspect is something that I really like to stress, and I don't think it gets talked about as much as it should in photography.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. I mean, you're hitting on one of my greatest fears, which is some client becoming injured on one of my workshops, because you're correct that this is not talked about enough, and it should be, because I am asked frequently, well, how do I get started? How do I get started? And I mean, ask questions. That's great. Like, I'm here to help you. I'm a resource. Reach out to me. I'll answer them. But like, people don't realize that you can start a successful workshop company, but people could be hurt, and you cannot go into this endeavor lightly, because people are trusting you with their physical safety. I mean, especially teaching in the Blue Ridge Mountains, we are in waterfalls, streams.
Yep.
I mean, and we go to some pretty difficult to reach places. Like, if someone slipped and broke an ankle out there, I mean, we would have a crisis on our hands. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think about this constantly, about what I would do in a situation like that. You have to be so prepared to think about it.
Yeah, I think particularly if you are running workshops, you've got to have a plan. You know, you've got to have, okay, if something goes wrong, what are we going to do, and who's going to do what? You know,
I don't think people think seriously or long enough about it. I had an experience not last year with someone who was not my client, but we were out hiking, and you know, they had a really bad fall. We maybe shouldn't have been on the trail that we were on after rain, but I had never been on this trail. I didn't know really any better about how precarious it could be if you continue on.
Yep.
And it got very muddy very quickly. And all of a sudden, with a massive drop off on the side, and just right in front of me, his feet went out from under him, and he immediately rolled off that edge. He dropped about 60 feet.
oh wow,
Yeah, and I mean, 60 feet before impacting. I mean, it was substantial, and it was terrifying. He is an older gentleman. I was immediately convinced that he was dead. You know, it was quite scary. I mean, I dropped my gear. First, you got to assess, can I get down there without hurting myself? Because then that's no good. You know, climbed down there. I was thankfully with my boyfriend. We assessed his health, got him stationary. He had some wounds. I mean, it was very scary. He could have been seriously hurt. Thankfully, I had a first aid kit. Thankfully, I had a GPS satellite communication device, which I did not have to use, thankfully, because he could walk out of there. But like, I was ready.
yeah.
I was prepared. And you have to be ready, because these things could happen. It could even be you. Like, we're not immune to falling down. I'm the biggest klutz I know. And I think people should be more transparent about these things that
Definitely.
could happen. Because, yeah, the more education, the safer people are going to be.
Yeah, and it's not about scaring people or anything. It's just making people aware that, you know, there are risks involved in places that you go, you know.
Yeah, we live in these bubbles, right? Like, we live in climate controlled houses with our, you know, your next meal is only a DoorDash away.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. If you need something, you never have to leave your house. You can get your groceries delivered. Amazon will deliver. Your food will deliver. I mean, we can live on our couch and have Netflix. And we forget that the world we live in is not built for our safety. So when you wander outside that door, this is a world where many of the things in it are designed to hurt you. People,
well, I mean, it makes going to Greenland to somewhere where you've got to hunt seals for food, so, you know, all that real, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done anything like the project we're about to embark on. I mean, I've been to Greenland, I've interacted with some of these communities, but like, physically being around for a hunt, which I know can be dangerous, or, you know, participating in any of these activities, I'm going to learn a lot. We have to have a plan.
Absolutely.
And insurance.
And insurance, yes, absolutely.
And insurance.
I think that's. I was talking to one of the guests on my podcast earlier, who has actually gone through the process of not just the insurance, but full travel sort of guide accreditation with one of the states, the state governments here. and the processes that you actually have to go through to get that accreditation, including, your safety plans, on top of the COVID plans that every business has to have now, the safety plans, the insurance, et cetera, all of the paperwork that's involved in doing that, And I think a lot of people, just sort of shrug that stuff off and go, well, I'm not going to need it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, until you do.
Yeah, that's it, until you do. Yeah. So I guess what are the key things that you focus on in terms of your environmental, work and when you're looking at the environment? What are the key things that you're really, I guess, thinking about in terms of telling your environmental stories?
So, I mean, sometimes I have an idea of a theme that I'm interested in before I go, right? So if I'm going to Greenland, of course, ice melt, glacier retreat, permafrost thawing, like these are all things that I know exist, so I can go pursue those stories. Sure. Sometimes I go somewhere and, for example, I've mentioned the Blue Ridge Mountains. Let's just stick with that one. So if you go there, it's lush, the southern Blue Ridge Mountains, it's a rainforest. I mean, it's incredible, moss, trees, everything just looks like it's thriving. I mean, it's hard to imagine that there is an environmental issue in a place like this because it just feels so healthy. So it's not obvious all the time, and sometimes it comes down to research. I'm a huge nerd. I'm a researcher by trade, so I'm going to go down the Google rabbit hole, beyond the Google rabbit hole, into the scientific journals and read actually about the issues that are affecting these areas so that I can understand them better. Because by me understanding them, I can better represent them through my photos. It's not always obvious. Like in the Blue Ridge Mountains, they're dealing with agricultural runoff problems that is causing changes to the water. And water is what makes this whole place run. And because of that, some of the endemic species there are having difficulty thriving. And that is something that is a hidden effect that's not obvious. And it's hard to know unless you actually take the time and invest the time and follow your questions beyond your lens and actually do a little bit of research on your own. And I'm not talking about like I did my research on Facebook. Okay, guys, we're better than that. Do a little actual research.
Move away from the conspiracy theories, please.
Yes, it's not hard to find a peer-reviewed publication. I promise, they're out there.
Google Scholar exists. A lot of people don't realize that.
Google Scholar is real.
And it makes a real difference when you're reading one of those peer-reviewed publications compared to some of the gump that you see floating around other parts of the internet.
Yeah.
What tips have you got for somebody that's interested in starting out and they're at the beginning of their landscape photography journey?
Try to find a local camera club, and they're not all good. Okay, like not every community is going to have a vibrant local camera club with a supportive group of people to help you, but I think you'll be surprised. And my first thing to say is don't discount the fact that most of these local camera clubs are retirees. That's just true because those are the people with the time to invest in local social communities. That is generally who is going to be participating in these groups. But that is a wealth of knowledge and a community of support that will help you learn if you're trying to learn some of the basics in photography. And it will also give you a space to experiment and get feedback. And that is really invaluable. It's a great stepping stone for validating your own knowledge before you try to branch out into something professional. Like you can have some of your knowledge validated right there where people, affirm in your community that you might know what you're talking about, or that you've mastered a certain skill, or that you can teach in your camera club and everyone can benefit and you build up your skills in that way. In terms of taking the show on the road, then man, try to find a good mentor. I didn't know to even look for one. I didn't know where to look for one. And when I realized I probably needed one, I was too afraid to ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was too afraid to ask people to mentor me. I was too afraid to ask questions because I thought that I wasn't important enough. And like, I can tell you that don't be intimidated by somebody's follower count on social media. They're real people too. And I mean, if they won't give you the time of day, then maybe they're not worth it either. But most people that I know in the photography community are welcoming, and they
Yep.
will help you if you approach them in the right way. And the right way is not, hey, do you want to collab? No, they don't want to collab with you. Okay, stop asking that. But come with a thoughtful question, engage with them first so they know who you are. Like when I first when I realized I needed to network, I engaged in a very thoughtful, intentional effort to build up my presence in the community by engaging on other people's social media. Comment on their post, let them know who you are. They'll recognize your name if you're active. Share their images, engage before you ever ask for something. Show that you're invested and that you're not just trying to suck some life out of them, because nobody in this industry has free time. None of us have free time. We are all incredibly busy. So invest your time and people will invest it back in you. That's my best advice.
Fantastic.
And people can come to me too. Like, I will do my best to give you the best advice that I can. I answer all of my DMs. Like, I will respond to you. I will try to help you. If I can't help you, I will point you in the right direction, because most of us are willing to give the time. You just have to show that, you know, you're not just trying to take our time, that you're trying to add something to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's really, really great advice. What sort of things do you like to do when you're not out shooting or doing your admin? Is there any time beyond that?
I can only laugh. I don't have much of a life right now. I wish that I had a really good answer for you. I don't. Maybe the reality of my life at this point in time is that I'm balancing so much that I'm working about 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I maybe try and take one day off a month. Things get different when I'm working in the field, because you kind of have forcible fun time, whether you like it or not, because you're out there. Yeah. Wow. You know, that makes me feel really bad about myself, Grant, that I don't have a great answer.
No, that's okay. Not everybody does, and
yeah, my work-life balance is terrible. I'm the last person to give advice on that. I mean, my personal relationships suffer for it. You know, I have terrible work-life balance, but part of that, it's a blessing and a curse, because when I am focused on something, nothing else exists.
Yeah.
Whether it's taking a photo or working on a presentation or teaching a class or focusing on my Greenland project, nothing else exists when I'm working on that. It is the sole focus in my life. And because of that, I can move mountains, which is great. I mean, if you're looking for a doer, I'm a doer. I can get things done. But, you know,
I've got to say, though, I think that happens in everyone's career, where you get all consumed by the career and you forget about life outside of it for a while. You know, I know I've done that in the past myself. You know, and you know things do suffer, and you know sometimes then you have to get that correction and go, oops, I've tilted the balance a bit too far that way. I need to lean things.
You know, it's funny because this actually connects to an issue that it is clear to me that my lack of work-life balance is a problem, right? So the first step is admitting it. Hi, I'm Taylor. I have a problem with work-life balance. Nice to meet you. But I think really like a moment that it hit me pretty hard was when I was talking to my boyfriends, and I was like, man, you know, I really want to ride the Trans-Siberian Railroad one day. Like, it's just a thing that has been, I just wanted to do it for a really long time. I just want to do it. I don't know why. I decided I want to do it. That's it. And I just was like, man, I wish I could go do that. I just don't have time. And I realized that that's exactly what people say who work corporate jobs. Like,
Yep.
that's why they don't take the vacation, or why they don't go on a,
Yep.
oh, I would, but it's
Been
just
there,
not a
done
good,
that.
it's just not a good time. And I used to be the person who would like yell at those answers, like there's no such thing as a good time. It's about your priorities. You make the time for the things that are priorities to you, which is
Yeah,
true, completely
absolutely.
true. If it's important enough, you will make the time and you will do it. So I have found myself in that predicament lately where I'm like trying to figure out how to balance these things a little bit better so I don't fall into the same cycle that I ran away from.
Yep. No, definitely. Definitely. So are there any photographers out there you think I need to be talking to? Who,
Definitely.
who,
Oh,
who,
there's
should
so many
I,
good ones.
who should I get on the podcast?
Yeah,
I've already got a very long list, but I like adding to it.
I will add to your list. I mean, I would be an idiot to not suggest my partner, Ashley Payne. She's not a landscape photographer, but it's really nice to get an alternative perspective,
Sure.
especially if you want to talk to somebody who's very focused on impact or projects with a strong cause behind them. She has been all over this planet covering stories from a photojournalistic perspective and creating films that have real impact. And I think that that's something that a lot of photographers are in search of, right? Beyond the pretty picture, looking for an impact. And she can speak to that like no one else I know. I would also recommend two people from my Mute Workshops team. Wayne Suggs,
Okay.
who has the privilege and honor of being one of the best humans I know on this planet. He is just amazing. But he also has this incredibly distinctive style of astrophotography that he has perfected over the years. I have never met someone so dedicated to the pursuit of a single photo. I mean, I have had the privilege and horror of shooting with him at night several times. And boy, these are long events because he is so dedicated to his craft. I do not have the level of intensity that he has. So he can really speak to creating something unique that when you see that photo, you immediately know it's his photo. I mean, it's
Yeah, I've
instantaneous.
seen some of Wayne's work. Yeah,
Yeah, he's fabulous. And the other person is Michael Strickland.
okay.
That's for all your printing nerds, which I aspire to be one day. He is a master printer. I can't even speak to the mad scientist things that he does with carbon transfers and earth pigments. I mean, it's really incredible. And he could really give you a serious breakdown on what it's like to create something like that.
Fantastic. I'll definitely have all three of those on the list. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Well, I've had a wonderful time. We probably should wrap up. I've only got one question, and for many, it's the most important question that we've got.
Okay.
Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Yes, I'm a pineapple on pizza girl. You can hate me if you want, but I'm standing by it.
Yeah, good on you. I don't care what hate comes our way. I think it's really important to get to the bottom of that question.
It's a very divisive subject,
I
so
know.
you're brave to bring it up.
I know. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me today, Taylor. I've really enjoyed catching up with you and finding out a little bit more about you, and in particular hearing about your project. Aside from, obviously we'll put the Kickstarter link into the show notes, etc. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can find it on my website. I post some on Instagram as well. I'm kind of across all the platforms, but the key to finding it is whether or not you can spell my name right. So it's a constant problem. It's Talor. There's no Y in it, and I have no explanation for that. I didn't.
You don't need one. You don't need one. All right. Well, thanks very much, Taylor. It's been
Thanks,
an absolute pleasure.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate your time too.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnephotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.